unless you're using a potato. So we didn't travel with our system. We traveled, and there's somebody, a vendor we have here. So we're using one of their computers, but it's a full slow. So this is his report. We're just waiting for it to run. Once it runs, it'll go to his profile page, and it'll be there with his data. So it's something that once you run it, it's saved, it's stored, and you can access it anywhere. So you can pull out your phone right now, you log in, or on your iPads, or wherever you are, and you have access to it. And once it runs, we'll give it to you in a variety of different forms, but we'll be looking at kind of our format, and that's kind of the trick of it. So there's a lot of logic that's involved. So whether you just see data in a number or a table is not the point. We're trying to get to ways of digesting information quicker. So quick capture would be one thing, quick processing is another, then quick interpretation, actionable results. So we don't want you to take hours or even minutes talking about stuff. If we get to the point where you're absorbing it in a matter of moments, that would be best. So you can see how Williams is here, it's functional, report's ready, and here's his scores. So, level 4. You are, I think you are the silhouette, you did a very good job. But we talk about your data here and looking at how you move. We look at his total scoring of points. So a lot of people say, can you take all of these different 19, 20 different motions and boil it down into one score? Absolutely. What we've created is what we call the Dari score. It's an accumulation of points you've attained for power, strength, and dysfunction. So dysfunction are bad biomechanical features, and it subtracts away from your score. Enjoy it. Generally speaking, you want your power to be above 1,000 and you want your strength to be above 1,000. That would be great. Every 500 points, you move up a level. So 500, 1,000, 15, and 2,000. 2,000 points or level 5 is extremely high. It's hard to get those points. With where he's at, we haven't even looked at a biomechanical feature of you, but one, I know what level you are, and if I looked at my heat map, I know where his problem areas are. So I would action this immediately and do my orthopedic tests. That's my visual understanding. But if I want to look at how I'm going to improve him, your strength, so your squats and your ability to control your body, we're right at 1,000 points. If you look at his height ratio, so his performance against an index, we like to be at, if he was 1.0, he'd be the perfect ratio of 1.0. He's performing better, so he's 1.3 basically, 1.29, so compared to populations, your squat and strength are good for your size. His power, though, is only 750 points. He is above 1, but if we're going to improve him, we have the biggest improvement to get power, to get strength, or to vertical jumps. So how do we get more output there is how he's going to increase his point totals. But if you notice, we want 1,000 and 1,000 and dysfunction, your bad points, we want that to be below 100. So his quality is actually quite good. We can shade down some points there, but we need to work on advancing our power. That's how we're going to get optimized and get to level 5. Level 5, again, is quite challenging to get to. We do not have a lot of level 5s. Now that we know the scores and where we would attack, improving power and has good dysfunction or good quality, we know he's a level 4. We can kind of look at the zones and where he is. So output ability is nearing excellent. His joint torque, so the torque and the forces on his body to complete this, he's actually in the middle of the road. So he doesn't have low torque, but he doesn't have poor torque. That's telling us your body can withstand training. You can put more demand on his system and it won't break. So we can increase the stress, which would increase our performance, but we don't want to go so far that we break down. If you see a perfect world, like identifying talent, you'd see a level 5 with really low torques. That's a bye. Genetically, have you ever seen someone jump and they're just like a rubber band and you're like, that is just gorgeous. And another person jumps and it's like, that was really ugly, right? Those are high torques. So then you look at people's abilities in their ceiling. So again, quality, right in the middle of the road. Balance is average. We could get better at our balance and control. That's an excellent one. If we look at his kinematic ability, we're seeing that the right leg is showing up to be a little worse. And if we looked at here, we know it's the right hip. So right hip range of motion, we would look at compared to his left is showing asymmetry. So a physical evaluation of that right hip is going to be very important. If you notice the other heat maps, there was his spine and his shoulders. So shoulder ranges of motion in different planes and rotations, we're showing differences here as well as your spine. So right now, if you have spine and shoulders, but even a little hip, you could have pelvic rotations and tilts. So I would have looked at your spine, probably number 1 is probably square 1 with you, and then see what that means for your shoulders, okay? Again, we don't know if it's muscle, if it's joint related, where the problem is, but we know a physical evaluation is needed in those zones. But we can dissect it further. We can kind of see if it's joint related or muscle related. So the second page, when we scroll past it, is actually an organic narrative. There are sentences that say, this is how you performed and attained your power points, your strength points, and your dysfunction. So again, if you weren't here, know nothing about it, you can sit down and read page 2 and understand exactly what was done and where you want to go. Page 3, this is our muscle map. So what we're doing with this is actually identifying the musculature he utilized to do explosive movements. So when you look at his shoulder, he's very lat dominant during rotations, okay? So he has a little bit of a rotation forward. So Terry's major or minor were probably weak, so some of his rotator cuff muscles would need to be evaluated, but not track dominant, which is that's a big win. And specifically in your rotations, he's offset. And that does have things for capsule, his longitudinal health. If you go into look at the lower body right now on this, you'll see, no, you're good. You can keep it on the muscle map, Jared. So right here, you're going to see, this is a posterior view. He's hamstring dominant on the left side, specifically bicep femoris. When he's producing his abilities, this one is right next to either your glute dominant and you're perfect, or you're using bicep femoris. It's probably the most pulled hamstring out of all of them, or the most pulled muscle really in the body. So people use it so much on explosive movements, but it can get so massed into looking like glute ability. So one would be, he'd need a physical evaluation of that musculature, not the joint. So he didn't show any huge asymmetries except for the right hip, but if he's producing power, Lon will look at this, his torques are very high, and he's using hamstring dominance or bilateral or biarticulate muscles. That muscle, in our opinion, is receiving much more stress than it can handle, and that's when you get a strain. On the right side, he's not hamstring dominant, but he's not glute dominant. He's more glute median. So external rotators are strong, which isn't bad, but your max ability to improve your vertical jumps, if we get the right muscle utilization for it, you will improve your ability. So it's not that your glutes aren't strong, it's just you're not using them during dynamic movements. Correct. So again, we're seeing soleus, so very good strength through your calves, but you don't have that elastic nature. If you were more gastroc dominant, you would see a little more springiness, if you will.
So how did you interpret then what, in terms of use of vertical jump, Matt presumably did?
Yep. So we do ground reaction forces, same as 1-to-1 to a force plate, no force plate sensor. So no markers, no sensors on anybody.
So how does the program differentiate what muscles are active or overactive?
Good question. So this is all of our intellectual property, but there's a long line to get there. So the first is we're getting accurate three-dimensional kinematic data, range of motions, data positions. We're also then from there extrapolating and able to identify ground reaction forces. If we have accurate ground reaction forces and kinematics that are fused, so there's no integration of them, you don't have two separate systems, we can then fuse it and then do back calculations or inverse dynamics to calculate ground reaction forces into joint torques. If I know joint torques at the ankles, knees, hips, low back, and so on up the kinetic chain, when he does explosive movements like jumps, we can actually look at the torque sequencing. So is he using his ankles, knees, and hips? Is he getting triple extension? The sequencing of the torques, when he produces his max net torque through his knee, I can take a snapshot at when that happens during, let's say, the concentric phase. If I know the angulation at which that torque occurred, I can go back to historical EMG studies and see what muscle mapping would have been used, identified, not the, all muscles aren't used, but the most active muscle during that zone. And then there's forward modeling techniques and simulations. Now, I can do a lot of this for movements that have been highly researched, but if somebody picked out a very, very fine-tuned motion that has not been researched or has not been modeled well, then you won't be able to do these predictive elements on it. So that's how we do all of our line of thinking. From there, if you kind of stop and take a minute, the graphs and the data are all there, and that's what people are used to seeing, but there's nothing new that we didn't talk about, but this is the way we go back and say, here's why. So when we saw his shoulder range of motions were off, here's him going through all of these range of motions, but if you'll notice these gaps, that's when we're saying, wait a minute, there's a difference. He's achieving more in a different plane. It's very easy to see here, but that's hard to interpret and get to an action step. That means orthopedic test of the left shoulder. Again, that's where we need to take that data and move it into some way of digesting it, some way of visually understanding it. So this is shoulder as well as spine. So we notice he had spine limitations. If you look at the pelvis, lumbar, thoracic spine, and how he curves through it and how it uncoils, you'll see good coiling and separation here, but when you get to here, you're noticing those differences in the spaces between it are not as segmental. So we're seeing differences in rotation and ability. So a lot of that is connecting right into his shoulder problems. If we continue down this is where we kind of get into some, let's call it meat and potatoes of it, instead of looking at the videos or looking at the first 2 pages. This is his squat performance. So during his bilateral ability, you can see how deep he went in the lowest angles, the min angle achieved, or the biggest angle achieved, if you will, depending on what you're looking at. We can even look at weight distribution through the entire phase. So is he looking like a dominance, or is he avoiding a side? And then unilaterally, we can compare his performance to his bilateral. So he's 75% of his bilateral performance on his left leg, and he was 70% on his right leg. So there's a 5% difference between legs here. If you look at the kinematic ability of this, the right leg, remember his right hip was lit up? And we said, hey, we have restrictions right here. I know it's 16 degrees difference. That's big. So during those range of motions, why? Is it because he's using external rotators? Is it the muscle, or is he having actually a joint problem? So I think more or less it's leaning towards a muscular problem, not a joint problem. But when you start talking about the hip, you really get into pelvis, and when he has that spine, we could have tilts, we could have a lot going on. So the physical evaluation is where this will culminate and whether or not what's happening. Go ahead and keep it there for just a second. I do want to make a note here. We do track things also like valgus, so it's not just flexion angle. And his valgus was average, so that means coming in ever so slightly. But as we're finding out, the deeper the performance, the better. You're going to have a little bit of valgus. Valgus isn't the end of the world. It's when valgus meets rotations. So when we're looking at this graph here, there's 2 purple lines for the left, which would be your femur and tibia. And if you start to see torsions, you'll see these 2 lines separate from each other. Right now he has a little bit of valgus, but he has basically 0 torsion. So he's not putting his ligaments, your ACLs, and those at risk. So even though he has a little bit of differences here, he's more of a muscular risk rather than a joint or a ligament risk. So right here is kind of showing a little bit of separation. You see that right there during the eccentric phase of that. So there are ever so slightly some things, but in the right side versus left side, you're looking at external rotation. If he's got really strong external rotators and really strong VMOs, he's going to be able to control his knee fairly well. So right now, performance is not poor, but the differences are really at the hip and finding out why. If you look at his jumps, so you saw your dysfunction was pretty low. We want to understand your joints, but when I look at joint torque and what he's producing, I look for sequencing of forces and torques. That's where I just right away I go to. During a vertical jump, you can see that he's producing 3 to 4% of his body weight in torque at his ankles, then 12 and 15 and 24 and 18. What's nice about this is you look and you kind of jump between these, you should see kind of the same model of jumps, the same torques that are being produced until you get to like unilateral. But those differences of being like, those are actually fairly low discrepancies between it. We've had a few people show up where they were 4 and 4, 18 and 18. But when you get into torques in the hips that are like 45% and 75%, those are starting to get astronomically high, and you're seeing huge deviations between the left and right. So what he's producing is actually fairly low torques for his entire body, and the sequencing is good, but it could be a lot better. So right now we're seeing good, and then it doubles, or I'd like to see a doubling. So if you did 5, you'd want to do 10, and if you did, you'd want to do 20. But honestly, the propagations are different. They're more like 7, 20, 40 is a good torque range. But this is fringe. Like this isn't as proven. But when we look at our data and those things, very, very under-torquing his hips. So he's using his ankles and his knees pretty damn well, but he's not channeling it through his hips. And that comes back to your hamstring and not the utilization of your glutes. So even though his point totals were good, this is something where if we get you using the right musculature and producing more stress on your system, which it can handle, he can improve his performance pretty radically with the right training modality. So right now, if you continue down, we're basically done with this one here. That's basically the end of the report. Orthopedic quality, like that would be huge for you, and then training, glutes mostly is where I would focus, and has the ability to achieve a level 5. So he has the opportunity to improve.
And then is there a minimum requirement in terms of what software you need in order to run that? So let's say if you bought the program but you're using your own software, for example.
So you have everything here is all under one roof of a company.
company. So it's not go to this vendor, this vendor, this vendor. So when you have the Dari system, you have hardwares, cameras, you'll get server grade equipment, and all of it then is online. So it's always evergreen, and you would never go, well, I have this piece of technology, how do I integrate it in with Dari? It's essentially just one package. It's not one piece and see what you have, and then we'll try and back in and work with you.
Okay. And then you lease the equipment?
Yep. Yeah, essentially the kind of the way the model is. So because we own and we built everything from start to finish, the hardware used to be, hey, you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for hardware. Oh, in 2 to 3 years it'll be antiquated and nobody knows how to run it. Sorry. With us, it's more of you're paying a monthly fee. It could be as low as $4,000. It could be around $8,000 on a high end, depending on really what you need and your stress. But that's going to give you evergreen hardware and systems, and then the vault access and ability to run those files is really what you're getting. So as we come up with new updates and new modeling and techniques, you're also getting those new things. So it's not pay per click. It's not pay per person. It's a flat, either monthly or yearly fee, and you go. Use it as much as you'd like.
But you can hire us for 1 week and then...
So generally you can, 1 week, no, but there are some windows where you're saying, I want to cover it for this window, yeah. In those kind of scenarios, they don't exist as much. What you then have is a system that potentially is one system that roves around because it's pretty mobile. So you could have a home base for it in one area, and that system could move to another area for 2 months, 1 month, and you could kind of do that. So,
and then
we might, I might be able to show
and then
that.
presumably, if you were to lease it, you guys would come over and give us like an in-service on how to interpret
Not
it.
only, oh yeah, so that's all part of the service. To give you an idea of just the breadth of it, you get the hardware, you get the software, you also get a medical healthcare liaison and a bioengineer that's dedicated to you even though they live in the States. So they will come over, they will show you how to run it, they stay with you, we certify you, you take tests on how to read reports, do it, workflow, to where if you know how to use it and you know how to use it and you're in different countries, you can pick up the phone and you have a common language which we've taught you. If you then go, hey, we collected on 100 people today and we need some help really reviewing the data, you can pick up the phone, email, text, and say, guy, your Dari, your group of support staff, say, I need help. I need help reviewing this. Help me get through all of it. That's what you're paying for. So all of that is included. Very service, very hand-holding, or if you go 2 to 3 months and you need a refresher course, then we're going to do that. So it's a little, you guys are a little farther away generally than what we used to do, but oftentimes it's email, phone, text, or I mean, we'll fly out to you regularly.
I would say that. Our first client was in Australia.
Yes.
Which
Our
is
first-
literally the flight was the longest commercial flight of that
So
we could get.
yeah, we're used to being up when you're sleeping and beyond vice versa. So it's just part of what we're offering. That it should be hand holding, and where it culminates. Let's say the end of it is, you're going to see 20 motions that we do. That's not it. We have a motion list of 180 different motions, and your people and what you want to track is going to be very unique. You're going to live inside what we provide to get yourself acclimated. Once you learn what you like, I talk about living in a house before you go build your own. Once you know what's going on and you have a common language and you know what the system can do and what the reporting capability is, then you sit down with our bioengineers and say, great, I love that heat map, but I want the muscle map right next to it. And when they don't do this, your statement saying they have this risk, I would use these terminology, this is how we would say it, and then I want them to immediately go see this person if they have this problem. And that's just part of your report. So now all of your logic, you're taking this and making it globalized and you're removing bias. So when someone sees it, it instantly produces your report and they're driving through those action steps. So it helps delineate between these lines and connect people across countries is really
And then can you do gait motions and
yeah, you can
running
walk,
analysis
you can put a
or-
treadmill in, you can do running analysis. You can put objects in, you cannot track the objects. To give you an idea, if you had a golf club, you could track the swing, but you're not tracking the club. To give you ideas, other applications, we worked with Talos groups and different ones where you can have an operator, a person be tested in basic clothing, and then you can put weight on them and do the other tests and see how the kit is affecting their motion. So there's lots of things you can do inside your environment to simulate different things if you'd like. But some of, I'll be really honest with you, we're growing our database of movement. So it's 180 plus. To give you an idea, we do ballet. It wasn't what we intended to do, but the demi-plie is motion 153. And we're ever growing in our knowledge. If you say, look, you don't have a motion because it's not military and it's focused, then That'll be motion 184. And we're going to start data mining it, and we're going to start producing it for you. So don't think you have to be confounded to a certain movement. If it's something that you need and want to do or do differently, we should denote that, make the change, and start providing you data on that. So,
Kill this real quick. I can find a photo.
yeah,
That's like what a fixed install looks like.
so we'll show you one more picture of he wants to change what an install
I don't want
looks
you to
like.
see my email.
And then we'll give you an idea of what a permanent or what our hardware really looks like instead of this. This is very mobile, but frankly, it could look a lot better. So, TV's back on. I got you. I'll just turn it on. So, we've been testing people kind of all day. We'll do the same with you. So when you're ready, we'll calibrate, we'll go through the test, we'll go look at the reports, and you'll get the report and all of our other collateral as well.
And